Welcome to Eviliv3, the live media commentary show that answers the question, do you have to wear a kilt to visit Scotland? Subscribe if you're new to the channel because today I'm reviewing Kindred Lands, Volume 1, Scotland. All right, my initial thoughts of this are, I had no expectations about this. I didn't know it existed. My mom actually saw it and bought it for me and then bought herself a copy because she was also interested in my heritage, apparently, seeing as she's part of it. And I was pleasantly surprised. What I thought was just going to be a generic coffee table of photos, which is not a bad thing. If you look at any photos of any sort of northern hemisphere nature, it's going to be goddamn beautiful. Scotland is one of those places, Ireland and Scotland and England, Wales, they're just jaw-dropping gorgeous when you look. I mean, there's more sheep in Scotland than there are people. There's land nowadays that looks brilliant, and I'll get into the nowadays portion of that here in a little bit. But then equally, if you go anywhere in the northern United States or Canada, it looks exactly the same. One thing of everywhere I've ever traveled, you always learn that everywhere's the same. Every single, like geographically, like the earth itself in every zone mimics other zones, you know, across the planet there. It all looks the same. Like there are certain locations that have distinct features and terrain, but it's few and far between. And most places, they're just, if not unremarkable, then just beautiful in their nature, in their natural way, you know. But it's not uncommon, is my point. And then human beings are the exact same, no matter what language you speak, no matter what country you go to. No matter where you are, we are all the same. We all have the same motivations. Yes, you're going to have the occasional one-offs that are just like fucking psychopaths and shit, or like fervently religious nut jobs. But for the most part, we're all exactly the goddamn same. And we always have to remember that we're the ones, not divine providence. We're the ones that drew lines in the ground saying, this is my area and that's your area. So with that in mind, I always sort of look at this planet rather than nations of this planet or countries of this planet, because it's just one ball that we're all hurling through space on together. Whether we feel like we're connected or not is less important. All right, that's how I see it. So those are my initial thoughts. Again, I knew nothing about this before my mom actually picked it up and gave it to me. And this is the third book that she's done that in the past few years. And so I kind of feel obligated. If she's going to buy it for me, I might as well read it. And if I'm going to read it, I might as well review it. I mean, why not, right? Let me give you a little bit of backstory about me. I was in the Clan Campbell Society North America, which is a Scottish association celebrating the family surname of Campbell, that is me. And I have multiple Campbells in my lineage from both sides of the family. My ancestry is heavily central and northern Scotland, and that's who I be. And so I've always had this sort of, because, you know, I played Dungeons and Dragons as a kid, and I watched all the fantasy films that came out, of which there are plenty, in the 80s, and I loved them all. And so I just thought, well, hey, why not just latch on to this idea of the sort of fantasy world of reality? You know, the medieval era, sort of the 11th to 17th century Scotland, which was ripe for warfare, clan infighting, raging against the crown, and failing ultimately. But they tried. That's all that really matters. And so I really appreciate my ancestry. I don't make any pretense like, oh, I'm Scottish. My ancestry is Scottish. I'm an American. I'm American through and through. But I appreciate and respect Scottish culture, Scottish landscapes, Scottish stories and music. And like, I just love it. And I don't know if I love it because it's my ancestry, because I'm forcing it, or because I naturally do. But you turn on some bagpipes, I'm going to be sitting down and listening, and like, no matter what, I don't even care. I will 100%, because I just, there's something in it that evokes a passion that I don't cognitively understand. I just emotionally accept, and I dig it. So, and again, that could be manufactured. I'm well aware of that. in either case, get like I have other coffee table books about Scotland, whether it's tartans or whether it's just photography of the Highlands, whether it's about Campbell's, whatever it is. This is not an isolated thing for me. And I just did the Men in Kilts series of novels and series reviews and stuff. So why not? Why not throw one more log on the fire, as it were? So this was published by Kindred Lands in 2023. I have no idea who they are. This is the first I've ever heard from them. In fact, I don't even know where they bought this book. Looking online at the website, it's not sold anywhere but their website. So she must have been in like a gift shop somewhere. I have no idea. I probably should have asked, but I didn't want to look a gift parent in the mouth. They just handed me something that said Scotland. I was like, thank you. And basically, Kindred Lands offers heritage tour books like this one from all around the world. And they are heritage books, meaning they're centered around telling cultural stories and celebrating the culture of whatever the country is it's speaking to. So they got France and Portugal and England and Italy and, all the Germany and stuff like that. They have a whole bunch, Spain, a whole huge list of different countries that they have this for. But it's not just the culture, it's also your heritage. So it goes into genealogy and everything like that. It's not a deep dive. This is really like a coffee table book. And so no matter what your particular ancestry is, or if you're a human on this planet, multiple ancestries, let's be fair, everyone is multiple everything. I even have Neanderthal in me. Yeah. How do they know that? I don't know. I just did a DNA test. They said I have Neanderthal. I assumed we all did, but they literally called it out in mine. I have a bigger percentage than my wife, apparently. And then also like unknown. I have unknown DNA in me. And it wasn't just from that one party that one time in college. I kid. In any case, this particular book features stories and diagrams of the country and its own regional borders, insights from experts and amateurs and artisans. And that's the part I really, really enjoyed about this. It details the reality of the Scottish Highlands too. And so I want to get to this. I had mentioned it just a minute ago in my initial thoughts about the reality of Scotland nowadays versus how we reflect on it. Scotland is one of those places where, and there's a whole bunch of them all around the world, arguably everywhere, but we reflect kinder on it than reality actually was for it. For example, and this is brought up in the book as well, which I really appreciate because it's something I never really considered, even though I should have, because it's sort of on the nose. The Scotland that we see today has gone through generations of reforestation, of celebrating and bringing back the natural environment. I actually also became a sponsor and landowner, air quotes, in Scotland. So it was like an anniversary thing, so we could be Laird and Lady Campbell, me and my wife. But we basically sponsor land at a conservatory, and they plant more trees and take care of the wildlife and bring back indigenous plants and everything to bring Scotland back to what it should have been. But when Scotland was really in its heyday, in that sort of 13th to 17th century, it was brutalized because they were not just dealing with the Industrial Revolution when that finally came around in the late era, but they were also dealing with England going up and deforesting. They needed to have land so that they could sell sheep. So they were tearing down their forests and destroying their environment so they could have sheep running wild. And the people that did cattle, they had to clear space for that. And basically what it did was completely destroyed the natural habitat of Scotland for generations. So much so that farmers couldn't even plant crops and have them grow. There's two main reasons for the exodus from Scotland to the Americas and to other colonies worldwide. The first one is war, and then the outcome of the war is that if you survived the battles and England caught you, then more than likely you were shipped off to some other colony somewhere around the world where England had its foothold in, and you were working for them as a slave there. The other one The other reason to exodus is because you couldn't survive. People were starving to death because they didn't have food. And you have to remember, back in the day, there was no train systems. If you're in the highlands of Scotland trying to survive, you didn't have a supermarket you could go to. You didn't have a community around you. You survived on what you put in the ground and took from the ground. And if you couldn't sell your livestock or anything, then you couldn't get money. You were literally just going to starve to death and die, and so many people did. And that was a huge reason why people fled Scotland and went to places like North and Central and America and South Africa, and huge migrations over to like New Zealand even. Like that was a big deal back in the day. And so I never really considered that aspect of it. And, sort of with that idiotic American sensibility, that sort of Victorian reflection of what Scotland actually was. We think it was this beautiful, peaceful land that occasionally they fought with each other over territory or some, minor dispute, but it was just this beautiful culture of happiness and living in harmony. No, it was never like that. It was garbage. It was garbage for the people that lived in it. It was garbage for the people who were trying to rule it. And it was a garbage for people who were just trying to just eke out a sort of a farmer's subsistence lifestyle. It was hell. And that's why people fucking left. Nowadays, it's infinitely better because there's a huge tourism trade and they're introducing, native habitants, whether it's animals or plants or whatever. And they're sort of bringing back their forests and stuff that were ripped away. But back in the day, that was not the case. And the endless wars were a huge, huge problem for anyone trying to live just a life, back then. So that was when it was sort of one of the stories that came out of this is reflecting on the heritage of migrants leaving Scotland and their progenitors, their future family members, I suppose. There's a word for it that's escaping me. There's a reason why they stopped, or they reflect, and they initially were sort of like, why the fuck did they leave? It's such a beautiful place. No, it wasn't then. It is now. Hence the tourist trade. All right. Another stuff, we have to realize that family, the idea of a clan is wildly different. They didn't really dive deep into that in this volume, but if it wasn't for the Victorian era and their romanticism of sort of Scottish culture, there still wouldn't be any tartans or kilts. That was outlawed after the Battle of Culloden. Like there's, huge wars fought for independence that were lost over and over again by the Scots. And England eventually got to a point where they're just like, you know what? Fuck it. Highland culture is outlawed. You can't own weapons. You can't dress like Highlanders anymore. You have to change your entire culture or you're going to be sent to a colony as slaves. Like straight up, they put it in law. And it has like the law printed in this book. And it's shocking. Like they couldn't celebrate their own culture. They couldn't do anything. It was really, really wild. And it was the Victorian era that sort of ended all of that and brought it all back. And then sort of added this concept of family tartan and the idea of independence within a clan. That was never a thing. Clans, you didn't have to be, like, for example, my clan would have been Campbell. You didn't have to be a Campbell. What they would often do in suing for peace whenever there was like wartime scenarios is they would ransom family members and they would swap family members back and forth in another clan. That family member that moved in with you may decide to stay after the time is up and they just become now part of Clan Campbell. They may have been originally Stewart or Campbell or McDonald or whatever, but now they are considered in the Clan Campbell. So which tartan do you wear? Well, back in the day, there were no assigned tartans. Tartans were literally made from the plants around you that you lived around that were native to your area, and there is a vast diversity, so they were different all around Scotland, because that's where you made your clothing dye from. And everything was wool. And because it was so expensive, you would save up for a year to save up the wool and the money in order to take it to a seamstress. And then they would weave out a 9 to 12 yard piece of fabric, which is where the saying the whole 9 yards comes from. And then they would just wear it as a great kilt as we understand it today, but it would just be a versatile piece of garment. They would use it as a tent. They would use it as, and I could actually, I haven't done this before. I could actually put together, because I have a great kilt, video showing you all the different ways you can wear a great kilt in the ways that it was properly used in the day. If there's any interest, let me know and I'll do it. Otherwise, it just looks like a shitty American putting on a kilt, and who gives a fuck about that? But I find it very fascinating personally that it's such a versatile piece of garment. But it was something that they cherished and they patched and they kept as long as possible because they were so versatile, one, but also expensive. You know, they had to save up for a whole year to afford them. But that's where the tartans came from, the natural dyes of the plants and weeds around you. The Victorian era, you know, we have ascribed this idea of, well, Clan MacDonald, Clan Stewart, Clan Campbell, they have set tartans that are approved to wear. That came out in the Victorian era, not before it. And so you have to always reflect on, this is not an ancient civilization that has existed, you know, for thousands of years in this way that we reflect on it now. This is a civilization that has evolved into what we now consider Scottish, but it was not always that way. That's another part of the complexity of family, clan, and culture that I find so fascinating about Ireland and Scotland in general, but humankind as a whole, that this book brought up really well. And then it goes in and starts to highlight artisans, and it does a really good job of highlighting this company. And I don't have their name here. I should have written it down. But there's also a really great American kilt maker channel, Kilts USA. Shout out to you guys. They're great. And they do Q&As about Scottish culture and kilts and everything. So it's an invaluable resource for anyone interested in the topic, and I highly suggest you check out their YouTube channel. But they went over to Scotland and talked to the same seamstress as well. But basically it was an accountant, a Scottish accountant, who got tired of doing her job, and she felt like she could do something a little bit more real and true and honest. And so she went and bought these old school Industrial Revolution looms and put them back into use. And yes, her garments are a little more expensive because they are all handcrafted with handmade dyes, the same way they did it in the old days. And she doesn't do custom tartans because she does it like the old days. There weren't specific tartans in the old days. And so everything is sort of bespoke and handmade and original, and minute flaws that you don't have in modern manufacture, but it is all old time craftsmanship. So it's all real wool fabric and linen fabric, meaning you could bury it out in the back. There's no synthetics. There's no fake dyes. It would just biodegrade in your compost pile like anything else you put out there. So it's this holistic approach to old-time craftsmanship in specifically Scottish industry, one that has been dying because everything's been farmed out to China and India, but they don't give a fuck about the culture. They don't give a fuck about craftsmanship. They're just literally, if they pay anyone, it's pennies to the dollar compared to anyone else crafting this with their hands. And so this company is doing a really great job sort of bringing back this old world style of crafting that's specific to Scottish culture. And I think that's fascinating. I don't care what culture you're in. We should be celebrating that type of behavior and moving away from the hegemony of this sort of mixing of everything and making it as cheap as possible, exploiting human existence in order to do that. Meanwhile, fucking up our planet in the process. You know, I'm not going to go off on some weird, hippie ideology, but we need to get, this is the only place we have to live. This is it. This is as good as it gets. So why don't we fucking take care of it? That's how I see it. And I respect other people who are doing the same. The history and folk tales. I love learning about different cultures. It doesn't have to be Scottish, but in this particular case, it was. And it talks just about some generic, holidays and cultural celebrations that are specific to Scotland, which are always fun. I knew about them already, but it's nice to get different perspectives on it. And then it also has what I really appreciate is little QR codes throughout the book, depending on the article that it's presenting, to go and either listen to music or visit a website, or you get more information about genealogy and stuff. It sort of gives you a jump off point, and then you can go explore more if you want to. And I appreciate that. It could have easily just left it out and just given you the article, and then you've just been, oh, that's nice. But no, it gives you an avenue for further research for those who really want to know. The highlight for me of this, I think, was the Battle of Culloden and the story surrounding that. And, we've seen it in so many different ways through historical reenactments, through Highland festivals, through it's just like it's pervasive in our culture to understand history generally, especially massive turning points in history, like the Battle of Culloden was for Scotland. But it went into more detail than I had ever seen before, and it wasn't even a lot, which means that I've always had this sort of surface level understanding of it. And while the broad strokes are generally enough to understand the complexity of that battle and the outcome of it and what led up to it, I appreciated the bit more of a deep dive that was presented here. And then it goes into the reality of tartans, where they came from, and sort of the history of it, which I've already sort of danced through. It talks briefly about different recipes and stuff. I like that. I love baking and I love cooking. It's just one of those things where when I get an opportunity to do it, I always enjoy it and I like to share it. I mean, there's videos on this channel and some of the other YouTube channels I run of me just baking, me just creating cooking and just creating different, things. It's just, for me, it's fun. It's one of those things where I garden, we harvest our own food. I make my own wine. It's just another avenue of connecting with your environment and celebrating what it means to be human. And what cooking does is not just connects you intimately with the ingredients that you have pulled out of your own garden, that you planted and cared for, and intimately connects you with your terrain, your territory, your total environment, but it also connects you intimately with the people that you're feeding and sharing it with. They're eating a piece of your hard labor, of the love and care that you put into crafting it. And there's nothing more intimate than that. And the respect that I give and I get when I eat other people's food or I have other people eat my food is one that is only outshined by love and affection, So it's those little stepping stones of appreciation of other human beings that you decide to appreciate. Goes over the cultural stuff. The one I found really, really interesting was the genealogy. And it presented ideas about why it's so hard to find genealogical records, and it gives you date references of, well, in Scotland, in these dates, you would have to look at the Catholic registrar. In these dates, you would have to look at the Protestant registrar. You'd have to look at the state registrars, and all these different areas to find genealogical information. But then you're going to have to deal with the fact that it was all done in either shorthand and detailed cursive or different languages like Latin or Gaelic. So it gives you sort of decoding information on how to reference these and different naming nomenclature styles and different vernacular used by these different areas. I mean, it decodes the whole genealogy thing brilliantly. And then it gives you resources. It gives you links, QR codes, and URLs to actually go to these sites and search these birth and death records and wills. And you can actually find your ancestry without having to rely on like the Mormons, which are really great at genealogy, actually. But I don't know why I said actually, but they really are great at it. But you can do your own research, and it gives you the avenues to do that. And I really, really appreciate that, because I've always been fascinated about how far back can I actually go with my genealogy, So far, I've only gone back, I think, to like the 17th century. maybe a little bit of the 16th century, if memory serves, but it's been a few years since I've delved into it. So that's another fascinating avenue that this gives you. And I never expected it out of a fucking coffee table book. So that's very, very cool. So my favorite part of this book has to be the Culloden information, the Battle Culloden, and then the genealogy stuff. I appreciate the cultural stuff, but they never mentioned haggis once. What the fuck? They never mentioned Angus beef or cattle herding. What the fuck? It did have a subsistence farmer referenced in it, and he was giving tips and stuff on how to farm in the highlands in a natural way, which I thought was really, really interesting as well. So that was also a highlight for me. But all in all, this book was surprising and wonderful. And I didn't have any expectations because I didn't know about it. And I thought it was just going to be a generic coffee book. And I ended up learning quite a bit from it that was surprisingly delightful. And so I really, really appreciated that. Because of that, I'm giving it 5 full evil eyes. Like, this is genuinely a great, if you're interested in the topic, it is a great book to get a broad view of a whole lot of different Scotland-specific bits of information. And the photography is stunning. The people that are highlighted are fascinating. The stories and culture is just, in my opinion, the best. And I really appreciate it. You know, even if I could do a least favorite part, it would be that it wasn't longer. I finished this book in a day, and it's, I think it's under 200 pages or something, but I wanted more. It left me wanting more. And thankfully, it had those QR codes and URLs so that I could find out and learn more at my own pleasure. I really appreciate that too. So definitely check this out. If you are a fan of Scotland or Scottish culture, or it's in your ancestry and you're just curious, this is a great place to start. So definitely do a little digging. You are very welcome, Bogues. How you doing? You'll add it to your book list. Your family main trips back to Scotland. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. You'll definitely dig it then if you're into it. It's 100% worth it. All right, that's gonna do it. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, remember that evil spelled backwards is live. So get out there and be evil.